The first smell that woke me today wasn't vanilla or cardamom. It was the cold, dry smell of steel, of handcuffs closing around my wrists. "Ma'am," a tired voice said, "you're under arrest." My heart stopped. I looked around my office, my sanctuary, the photos of me and my late husband, the Entrepreneur of the Year award on the wall, everything blurred. Arrested? For what? There's been a mistake. They didn't answer. They walked me out. Right through the middle of the bakery during the morning rush, I saw my staff, the bakers I considered family. They froze, hands still covered in flour. I saw their eyes. Not the admiration I was used to. It was shock, fear, and worst of all, suspicion. The humiliation hurt more than the bite of the cuffs. They pushed me into the back of a squad car. The door slammed shut. The interrogation room. Cold. Cheap fluorescent lights humming overhead. "Ma'am," a tired voice started, opening a thick file. "We have records of multiple transactions wiring a very large sum of money from your company accounts to an offshore account, specifically the Cayman Islands." She slid a bank statement across the table. $500,000. I stammered. "I didn't do this. This is my company." "The account is registered to a shell corporation, and the authorization signature is yours." They showed me another document. It was my signature. I had signed it, but I couldn't remember when. My head was spinning. Hearthside Bakery was my baby. I'd built it from the ashes after my husband died 20 years ago. I'm being framed. I have to be. Please, I need to make a phone call. They gave me one call. My hands were shaking. I called Leo, my son, my CFO. "Mom?" His voice was rough with sleep. "Leo," I sobbed, "honey, they arrested me. They said I embezzled." "Mom, oh my God." His voice cracked. He sounded terrified. "Where are you? Which precinct?" "Mom, don't say anything. Not one word. Mark and I are on our way. Do you hear me? This is a terrible mistake. It has to be." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Pure relief washed over me. My son was coming. He would fix this. An hour later, Mark walked in. My son-in-law, Sophie's husband, and most importantly, the company's in-house counsel. His face was grim, professional. "Mom," he said quickly, dropping his briefcase, "this is bad, very messy. The wire transfers are real. Someone used your access." "Mark, I didn't—" He cut in. "I know. But right now we have to assume you're the target. They're going to freeze the assets. They'll shut down operations." He pulled a thick stack of papers from his briefcase. "I need you to sign this immediately. It's a power of attorney. It gives me legal authority to represent you, to deal with the banks, and most importantly, to seal sensitive company files from this investigation. It's just a formality to protect you." My mind was still reeling. The police? A jail cell? My name on the news. Protect me? "Yes, Leo's outside trying to get the bank on the phone. I need this now." Mark held out a pen. I didn't read a single word. Why would I? This was Mark. Family. He was trying to save me. I signed every page he pointed to. I didn't know I wasn't signing a shield. I was signing my own death warrant. Mark posted bail. "You can't go home, and you absolutely cannot go to the bakery. Both are potential crime scenes." My daughter Sophie picked me up. She didn't hug me. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. Her gaze was cold, fixed on the windshield. "Sophie, are you okay?" "I don't know, Mom. I don't know what's happening anymore." She didn't take me to her house. She took me to a high-rise corporate apartment. Sterile, cold. Mark said you should stay here until this blows over. It's safer. She put the key card on the counter. I have to go. I have to get back to the office. And then I was alone. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. I needed to know what was happening to my company. I opened my laptop. I tried to log on to my work email. A red box popped up. Access denied. Your password has been changed. A chill ran down my spine. It's okay, I told myself. Mark is just securing the system. I looked around the room. On the nightstand, there was an iPad. Sophie's old one. She must have left it here. I picked it up. It still had a charge. And it was still synced to her account. Emails and iMessages started flooding in. Most of it was junk mail from fashion brands. I was about to put it down until an email in her sent folder caught my eye. Recipient, Leo. Subject, Plan B. Date, 2 days before my arrest. I opened it. My heart seized in my chest. It was one line. Are you sure this Plan B is solid? I'm worried. What if she finds out about Mark's wire transfers? My blood ran cold. Plan B? Find out about Mark's wire transfers? She didn't write the fraudulent wire transfers. She wrote Mark's wire transfers. They knew. They knew before the police ever showed up. Leo's panicked voice on the phone, Mark's grim, professional face, Sophie's cold stare. It wasn't worry, it was an act. They weren't trying to protect me from an investigation. They were covering something up, and they were using my panic, using a jail cell against me. I stared at the screen, the blue light glowing on my face. I realized I wasn't in a safe house. I was in a cage, one my own children had built for me. I don't know how long I sat motionless in that sterile apartment. Minutes? An hour? The words Mark's wire transfers just danced in front of my eyes. No, I wasn't going to sit here like a pawn. I'm not some senile old woman they can just cast aside. I had to see it for myself. It was late afternoon. I knew the bakery was closed on Sundays. It was my only chance. I pulled up the hood of my coat, put on sunglasses, and called a rideshare. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a cold rage that was beginning to build. When the car turned on my street, I saw it. My bakery. My sanctuary. But something was wrong. It felt cold. I walked to the front door, my hand shaking as I put my key in the lock. It wouldn't fit. I tried again. No. They had changed the locks. They had changed the locks on my home. I walked down the alley to my office window. I pressed my face against the cold glass. The office was empty. Not messy. Empty. My desk was cleared. The awards, the photos of my staff, the picture of me and my late husband, the one from our grand opening, gone. In its place, on the far wall, was something I didn't recognize. A new logo. I squinted. Sleek, soulless letters. Hearthside 2.0. 2.0? I whispered to the glass. As if 30 years of my life were just an outdated piece of software that needed an update. They weren't just locking me out. They were erasing me. I went back to the apartment like a sleepwalker. The rage turned into a numb dread. They could change the locks. They could throw away my pictures. But they couldn't. I opened my laptop. I was locked out of my work email, but they had forgotten my personal account. And there in my inbox was an email I'd almost missed. An email from Galloway Capital Partners, a private equity firm. Subject, Project Hearthside, Phase 2 Appraisal. My trembling hands clicked the attachment. It wasn't an audit. It was a deck, a 50-page plan for the restructuring and asset liquidation of Hearthside Bakery. I skimmed past the corporate jargon, optimizing synergies, streamlining headcount, until I got to the last page. A memo. The sale was in its final stages. A massive food conglomerate. They weren't buying my company to grow it. They were buying it to gut it, to close the artisan bakeries, fire my staff, and keep the Hearthside name to slap onto their mass-produced frozen bread. This wasn't a rescue. It was an autopsy. And I realized what Plan B really was. Mark's wire transfers weren't the cover-up. They were the excuse. They used it to create a scandal, to scare me, to get me out of the picture. So I, in my panic, would hand them the very weapon they needed, the power of attorney. I had to hear his voice. I called Leo. "Mom," he answered immediately. His voice was still laced with that fake worry. "Are you okay?" Mark said. "What is Galloway Capital Partners?" I cut him off. My voice was ice. Just a second. But in that second, I heard everything. My worried boy vanished. The CFO showed up. "Mom, you need to rest. You're not well." "You're selling my company, aren't you?" "We're saving the brand," he hissed. "Your liability. Your situation is a liability. The board agreed. Mark is handling it." "What board?" "I am the board." "Not anymore," he said. His voice was like stone. "That power of attorney you signed, it gives you Mark your proxy. Frankly, Mom, you're not stable enough to make these decisions. Don't call me again. Go through Mark." He hung up on me. My son hung up on me. The power of attorney, it wasn't a shield. It was the knife. I sank to the kitchen floor, but I didn't cry. I couldn't, because one question kept screaming in my head. Why? Why this cruel? Why destroy me? Greed? Yes. But something didn't add up. The desperation, the rush. Sophie's email, Mark's wire transfers. They weren't just framing me. They were covering for Mark. I needed proof. I needed the truth. And I knew exactly the only person on earth I could trust. My husband's old baking mentor. He'd retired last year, but he was the one who taught me how to knead. He was the soul of Hearthside before I even existed. I bought a burner phone with cash. "Elias," I said when he picked up. "It's me, Catherine. They're stealing it." Not a moment of hesitation. "What do you need?" "They changed the locks on the front door, but did they change the lock on the old server room in the basement, the one behind the old flour sacks?" A dry chuckle. "Those kids don't even know it exists." "I need the backup hard drive. Last month's drive, before any of this happened." Elias was 70 years old, but he moved like a ghost. That night, he slipped into the kingdom he once ruled. He brought the drive to me hidden inside a loaf of sourdough. "Don't let them put out your fire, girl," he said, gripping my hand. I plugged the drive into my laptop. There it was, the entire company history. And I opened Mark's personal folder, the one he thought was hidden. It wasn't bad investments. It was worse. Page after page of statements from offshore gambling sites. Mark was drowning in debt. $3 million. He had been embezzling from the company for 6 months. My son-in-law, the man I trusted. And then I saw it. Not in Mark's files, in Leo's sent folder. An email from Leo to Mark, dated 3 weeks ago. And as I read it, I felt the floor fall out from under me. "This is a mess. You're going to drag us all down. We can't hide $3 million. But we can move it. We'll frame her. Use her signature stamp, the Cayman account. She's old. She'll never see it coming.
Call the cops yourself. Use an anonymous tip. Once she's arrested, she'll be desperate. She'll sign anything, including the POA. We sell to Galloway. Your debt gets erased. I get the company. Sophie gets the lifestyle she wants. It's the only way." I read it again, and again, and again. They weren't just saving Mark. They were profiting from my destruction. They weren't just covering a crime. They were committing a bigger one. I sat in that cold, silent apartment, and I didn't cry. The shock was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was fire. They thought I was the outdated version. They forgot. I'm the one who wrote the original code. That email was burning on my screen. $3 million, a perfect plan. The sale was happening in 7 days. I had 7 days. I couldn't go to the police. Mark was a lawyer. He'd covered his tracks too well. My evidence was circumstantial. It would be thrown out at trial. It would be my word against theirs. And they had already painted me as an unstable old woman under investigation. It would be a legal battle that dragged on for years. By then, the company would be sold. My husband's legacy would be gone. I had to stop the sale. And how do you stop a sale? You destroy the asset. Galloway Capital wasn't buying ovens and flour. They were buying the name. They were buying the story. They were buying the secret recipes that made Hearthside Bakery. And I realized I couldn't save my company, but I could burn it to the ground. I picked up the burner phone. I called Elias again. "Elias, do you still have the book?" A pause. I heard his sharp intake of breath. "The red leather one? Your husband's journal?"
Yes, it was my husband's original recipe book, the one I never digitized. Leo and Sophie always thought it was just a dusty, sentimental keepsake. They didn't know. It was the company. I had 6 days. I drained my last personal savings account. Action 1, I went online. I formed a new LLC, not in my name, in Elias's oven. Action 2, I went to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office database. The Hearthside Bakery trademark was still in my name personally. It was a small clerical error Leo was always nagging me to fix. I never did. I clicked. I filled out the form. I surrendered the trademark. I released it into the public domain, free for anyone to use. Action 3, I went to a FedEx store. I brought the red leather book. I carefully photocopied the 10 most important recipes, the ones that built our fortune. I wrote a short, anonymous note, and I sent the package overnight. Not to a lawyer, not to a reporter. I sent it to the Gastro Vandal, a notorious food blogger with 10 million followers, the one Sophie was always trying to get into the bakery, the one famous for exposing the lies of the food industry. My note just said, "A legacy isn't for sale. The truth should be free." And then I waited. Friday, the day of the signing. I sat in the corporate apartment sipping cold coffee. I turned on my laptop. 8 a.m. The Gastro Vandal's video dropped. She held my husband's book up to the camera. "I just received this," she said, "and if it's real, it is the biggest food scandal of the year. This is the original recipe for Hearthside Bakery." She turned the page. "And I received it," she continued, "along with a story that the founder, Catherine, is being framed by her own children to sell the company to a conglomerate." The video zoomed in on our famous 72-hour sourdough recipe, the one Galloway Capital thought they were paying $50 million for. 9 a.m. I logged into the Hearthside Bakery Instagram account. Sophie had been so busy selling the company, she'd forgotten to change my original founder's password. I posted a black square with white text.
As of today, Hearthside has no more secrets. They belong to all of you. This was my husband's legacy. Enjoy. And then I posted the 10 core recipes, one by one. 9:05 a.m. My burner phone rang. It was Leo. I let it go to voicemail. His scream filled the silent room. "Mom, what did you do? What the hell did you do? Galloway is pulling out. They're out. You destroyed everything. You've ruined us." I listened to the voicemail. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. I just felt empty. I had destroyed my 30-year-old company. I had burned my own house to the ground to keep the thieves from claiming it. Leo's phone rang again. This time, I answered. "Where are you?" he roared. I answered, my voice terrifyingly calm. "I'm setting your father's legacy free." I hung up. I took the battery out of the phone and dropped it in the trash. I picked up my small purse, the only thing I'd brought from my home. I walked out of the apartment toward the train station. I had no idea where I was going. I had no money. I had no company. I had no family. I only knew that Catherine, the CEO of Hearthside Bakery, the betrayed mother, had died in that room. And I needed to find out who or what was going to rise from her ashes. I don't know how long I was on that train. I just knew I had to go south, as far as I could get from the cold of the city, from the ashes I had just made. I got off in a small coastal town where the air was so thick with salt, I thought it might scrub away every trace. Catherine, the CEO, the mother, she died at that train station. My name was Kate. 6 months passed. I rented a small attic apartment above a thrift store, anonymous. I cut my hair short. I worked in the kitchen of a small beachside cafe. I washed dishes. I mopped floors. I prepped vegetables. The owner was Maya, a young woman with tired eyes but a constant smile, trying to keep the place afloat by herself. She didn't ask about my past. She was just grateful I showed up on time. One morning, the cafe's ancient mixer broke. Maya was near tears. "The Sea Festival is this weekend. I'll never make enough cookies in time." Without thinking, I said, "Let me." I didn't need the mixer. I used my hands. I felt the grain of the dough. I felt the yeast activate. The smell of cardamom and vanilla, a smell I thought I'd lost forever, filled the tiny kitchen. That day, I wasn't just kneading dough. I was kneading myself back into existence. Maya tasted the first batch. Her eyes went wide. "Kate, this is magic." We opened a small stall at the festival that weekend. No sign, just a wooden table and trays of pastries. We called it Kate's Counter. And they came. One by one. They lined up. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know I was a former CEO. They just knew this croissant melted in their mouths. They just knew this sourdough was real. For the first time in 30 years, I felt peace. I wasn't a brand. I wasn't a legacy. I was just a baker.
Look at her technique. Pro. Wait, that face. Does anyone else think that looks like the CEO of Hearthside Bakery? Looks like that is her. Catherine, the one who destroyed her own company? I had run from my legacy, but it found me through a TikTok video. They found me. A week later, Saturday, during the peak of the market rush, it wasn't Leo. It was Sophie. She appeared, standing 10 feet from my stall. She looked thin, worn out, and her eyes were filled with a kind of hatred I'd never seen. "Mom," she said, her voice a hiss. "Sophie," I replied. My hand tightened on the bread knife. Maya looked at me, worried. "The game is over," Sophie said. And then I saw them. She wasn't alone. She was with two men in uniform, the town's chief of police. They walked toward my stall. The chatter of the market seemed to die. "Ma'am," the chief said, his voice firm, but not unkind. "Are you Catherine?" My heart dropped. "Yes." "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we have a warrant for your arrest from your home state for violating bail and fleeing your court hearing 6 months ago." I was stunned. What hearing? Sophie stepped forward, a cold, twisted smile on her face. "You run well, but you forgot. You're still a criminal. The original embezzlement case was never dropped. Mark and Leo just let it sit. And when you didn't show up to court," her smile turned cruel, "you made yourself a fugitive." This time, it wasn't a city interrogation room. It was a small town holding cell. I could smell the ocean through the small window. This time I wasn't scared. I had nothing left to lose. An hour later, they let Sophie in. "They're on their way," she said, sitting across from me, separated by glass. "The marshals. They're taking you back." "Is this what you wanted, Sophie? To see your mother in handcuffs again?" "What I want," she hissed, "is for you to stop destroying my life. Mark and Leo, they lost everything. The Galloway deal fell through. They're facing dozens of lawsuits from investors." There it was. "So, why arrest me?" I asked. "What's the point?" "Because," she said, leaning in, "Galloway is still interested. They still want the brand. But they need you. They need you to show up, say you had a nervous breakdown, that you're sorry. They need you to cooperate to rebuild Heartside 2.0. They weren't just arresting me, they were blackmailing me." "You want me to lie," I said, "to save them?" "You want me to fix what you broke," she yelled. "Just agree to cooperate. Mark and Leo will handle the rest. They'll work with the DA. This embezzlement charge, it goes away." "It'll go away because I never did it." "Mark said—" "I don't care what Mark said," I cut her off. "But do you know why he really needed the money?" Sophie froze. He made bad investments." "No," I said. My voice was cold and sharp as a blade. "He owed bookies $3 million. He's a gambling addict, Sophie." Her face went white. How do you know?" "Because Elias's hard drive didn't just have emails, it had Mark's personal bank statements and the mortgage application, the one you co-signed. You mortgaged your house 2 months before my arrest, didn't you?" Tears welled in her eyes. He promised he would stop. I said, "You weren't protecting Leo," I said, the final ugly truth landing. "You were protecting Mark. You weren't a victim, you were an accomplice. And you were willing to throw me in jail to save an addict who ruined us both." Sophie collapsed, her sobs echoing in the small room. The door flew open. Leo stormed in, looking like he'd driven all night. His eyes were red, panicked. "Mom, stop it! Stop it!" Yo yelled. "Sophie, what are you doing?" I stood up, looking straight at my son. "I stopped 6 months ago, Leo. You're the ones who dragged me back." I didn't mean for this," he said, desperate. Mark said no one would get hurt. It was just paperwork." "You chose Mark over me," I said. "You chose money over family. That was your choice." I turned to the police chief, who had been standing in the doorway, listening to the entire thing. "And now, I'm making mine." I took a deep breath, smelling the salt air. "I'm not going anywhere," I said to the chief. "I'm not going back there as a criminal, but I will go back as a witness. I'm calling my lawyer, and I'm calling the FBI." I looked straight at Leo, my voice steady. "I have proof of wire fraud, embezzlement, and blackmail against Mark,
And I have proof of both of your complicity. Mark was arrested, not in an office, but outside a casino. Leo walked out of a courthouse, his face hidden from the cameras. Sophie sat alone in a house with a foreclosure sign on the lawn. The Hearthside Bakery sign was taken down. A week later, I was back at the farmer's market. The Kate's counter sign was hanging. Maya ran out and hugged me. They say blood is thicker than water, but they're wrong. Blood can be thinned by greed. A legacy can be sold for fear. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who fights for you. It's the hand that holds yours when you're in cuffs. It's the one who sees you when you're invisible. They took my company, they took my name, but they gave me back my life. My name is Kate, and I am a baker. My story is over, but I have to ask you, if you were in my shoes, could you have forgiven them? Or where is your line? Would you choose family or justice? Let me know what you think in the comments.